Namaste and welcome to the Divas That Care Network. I'm your host, Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, our network is going into its 16th year and is listened to in over 30 countries. I'd like to personally thank you for giving me the gift of your time. As always, it is my honor to hold space with and for you. And today we are very lucky to have Danielle Costa Macabre, a licensed professional counselor, to join us and help us continue the conversation, heavy as it may be, on women, not necessarily just women, but standing in our truth, having power in a safe space, in a safe way, and how we might best be able to do that. So Danielle, thank you so much for joining us today. And may I give you a moment to just introduce yourself to our listeners?
Of course, yes. Thank you, Gia, and thank you for having me on. I'm happy to be here. Yes, I'm Danielle Costa Macabre, a licensed professional counselor. I have been in the field for over 20 years, working with families and individuals. I also have a history working with DV victims, and their children. So something probably, Gia, you didn't know about because that's
I
that's
didn't, but
a
it's pertinent.
previous life for me when I just got started out in the field. So yeah, I go way back with that too. So yeah, and then also I'm a yoga instructor. So
Yeah.
of course that
Well,
is
and
to add
uh,
on to my
to add on, and that's how we connected, obviously, and why
yes,
why
yes.
on now more than one account you are just the perfect person to have this conversation with, which I, like you said, I didn't even know, but I've been
Yes.
leaning very heavily into the throat chakra aspect for the
Mhm.
entire kind of conversation when we talk about, firm boundaries, kind of staying true to yourself. And then, as I've kind of gone through the other episodes, I've had to say out loud, and I said to you when we had the conversation before this, like, and even today and in this day and age, we live in a country that allows us, we have probably one of the best chances to stand in our
Yes.
truth as women and to
Yeah.
convey our boundaries and hold them strong. There are many countries in this world where that's not even an option. And then I
Yeah.
still have to preface and make sure that you're have the emotional awareness and intelligence to know that you can do so safely, because sometimes giving that advice to women is simply unsafe. And how
Yeah.
horrible is that?
Yes, yes. Sometimes it's unsafe, climate wise. Sometimes it's unsafe within our own world where we
Mm-hmm.
don't feel the support of our families and friends, our social network, to feel like we can live in our truth and be open about who we are and what we represent. So yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it doesn't feel safe.
Right.
Yes, unfortunately.
Right. And I love that you brought up the social aspect too, because there is, the whole conversation of what, and I don't personally like the word victim, but you
Mm-hmm.
kind of have to throw it out in its
Mm-hmm.
present relevance to this conversation, is when the victim then gets re-victimized, if that's a word, to a second degree
Yes.
by their own social circle, ostracized, when they
Yes.
make the choice to break away, when they make the choice to stand in their truth. So now you're taking someone who has gone through, let's say, any form of abuse where a boundary needed to be set. And I'm not going to, I know that, it's been narcissistic abuse has been like an Instagram buzzword. And I think it gets
Mm,
a lot of attention, some very warranted and some very unwarranted.
yeah.
But let's just talk about the idea of verbal or emotional abuse, or the blind abuse, right? The abuse that isn't on your
Mm,
skin, isn't on your body, things that can be
yeah.
ignored, right? Suffering in silence, if you will. And
Mm,
the then second step of what someone who does stand up for themselves in a safe space is able to disengage from that relationship. And then they get a second bout
ah,
of alienation, victimization, like pick
yeah.
your Asian, right? Pick your word that is then
Yeah.
compounding an already vulnerable person who's gone through a lot and removing potentially the support they thought they had.
Yes, yes. No, absolutely. It could be very damaging. Through our supports, through our family, I mean, if you can't be yourself through your support network, I mean, that's what they're there for, right? And
Right.
friends and family, where can you feel safe? Where can you speak your truth if not there?
Right.
So I always I tell all my clients, but my women too, that just, it's so important, even if you just have that one person who you can speak your truth to and who gets it and can honor you and validate, it's, it can be life changing, life
Yeah.
saving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you do need some, I feel like you need the idea of a
Hmm.
cushion to fall on in order to extricate yourself from a situation that's
Hmm.
not for your highest and best good. Let's
Yeah.
go on the less dire aspect of the conversation. But
Hmm.
are there any cues you look for? Is there any advice that you give to men or women? Because I don't want to say that you can't have abusive females in your life. They exist too, 100%.
Absolutely.
So it is not, this is not
Yes.
a, and again, I always kind of say
Hmm.
no gender. We're just going on the
Yeah.
dichotomy dynamics as they are.
Yes.
Are there things that you can look for or give guidance to people on how to determine if they, and I know this is a loaded question, so the best of your ability, how to determine if they are safe, or what is there a safe way to verbally create a boundary? Or if you're unsure, are there cues to look for in a relationship where if you think as a human you feel unsafe, or you're feeling taken advantage of, used, abused, whatever word you want to use, is there a way that
Mm.
you can, is there some sort of factor that you can rely on to say it's safe for me to do this, or it's not safe for me to do this, and I need to think of another way to go about this at a later date in a different fashion? Is there
Yeah.
anything that you see through what you've experienced that
Hmm.
that gives a person the idea to be, that helps with that deciding where that line is? Because I know it's got to be completely situational,
Yeah,
to each person, so
absolutely.
it's a hard question.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Really, if there's anything that I am like picking up that someone is saying within, in context of like their relationship, their partner relationship, I always like to tease that out a little bit more.
Right.
Asking those questions like, well, do you feel safe? What if you were to say, this or that? How do you feel like your partner can support you in that? And also, Gia, I work a lot with teens.
Okay.
So I do have actually a checklist that I go over, you know, uh, healthy relationships versus unhealthy relationships. And then sometimes we bring out, the wheel of
Well,
abuse, and sometimes it is really eye-opening for someone to be like, you know what? I didn't even identify that as unhealthy, but I see it on the unhealthy list. So, so you're like, wow, I was just, because a lot of it also has to do with, how we grew up,
yes.
like our first family relationships too, that then if something was normalized when we were growing up and then we experience that in our partner relationships, we may not know that that is something that we don't have to accept, something
Right.
that's not healthy for us. So, just having that discussion around that is helpful.
And I will confess, I did not see that wheel or know about that wheel until I
Mm.
was well out of my teenage years. So I
Mm.
love that, I love that as we evolve as a species and we start to be more considerate. And I think that's generationally, that's always the move, right? We hope that the generation coming up after us knows better and does better. And
Yes.
but I've had this conversation recently, and it's not really about abuse, but it is about it was about that same generational gap. And at what point is the fact that they've always, we're talking about elderly parents, or we're talking about, these ingrained
Yeah.
dynamics that are not going anywhere, right? And
Hmm.
and at what point is it not okay? And I had a friend that was
Yeah.
going through something, and she's going through something really, really challenging, and she's got an elderly parent, and he's not getting it. And
Mm.
I have to, I'm like, at what point do you just stop letting him off the hook? At what point is it, do you just call them out and say, you know what, like, this is what I'm going through, you can do that chore today,
Yes.
like, and that's where, like, my throat
Yeah.
chakra is probably okay. Maybe I need to dial it back a notch. I've been
Hmm.
told that. I wouldn't be surprised. It's all about balance. But, you know, that's part of the conversation too. Abuse
Absolutely.
is one side of a sliding scale, right? And even that has its
Hmm.
own scale. But there's
Hmm.
these daily interpersonal dynamics with family members. It doesn't have to be a partnership or a relationship in
Yeah,
that, in a sexual or,
absolutely.
romantic way. It can be these family
Yes.
dynamics. And at
Hmm.
what point is it healthy to say, that's it, I'm done, or here's my boundary, and that's enough. And in
Yes.
theory, that should be safe as adults, one would hope, right?
Hmm.
Although you can't make
Yeah.
that broad-based statement. But do you have any insights into, what, where where it becomes like reverse abuse of the older person because they're so set in their ways, right? Like, where your
Yes.
boundary can become like aggressive, like, I want to go down there and yell at her parent for her, right? Like, what are you
Yes.
doing? So where is
Yes.
there a line, or is there a way to, obviously, hire a paid therapist, hire a professional, but what if that person won't go, right? Like, is there some sort of
Right,
insight that you can
right.
provide to someone that's just looking at this generation above us and going,
Hmm.
hey, that's not okay anymore.
Yes, yes. I understand that so well because I do work with families as well. So going back to my, what I was saying earlier about like working with teens or even young adults in my practice, that their parents either are, don't have the boundaries that they could or should have, but they're coming from an abusive situation, and they don't see anything wrong with that,
Right.
if they went through it. So yeah, in my work with clients in those situations where it's just the lines are blurred, the boundaries have been crossed so many times. And we do work on self-care. I
Right.
believe that it starts there, because when you are, you're being abused, or your boundaries are being constantly violated, you're not able to take care of yourself. You're not able to build any strength that way. So I always try and encourage self-care, individuation, separating out, wherever you possibly can,
Right.
whether it's I'm going to take a class, or I'm going to, work on my health or fitness, because it really can feel like I don't have any power in this
Right.
situation. And, but, we do. Us women can be powerful. And of course, not only women, but even, men in this situation, they can take care of their personal space, and learn how to do that through, I believe, self-care. Obviously, exploring in therapy is helpful,
Yeah.
but
Like, if
if
you
they
can do it
cannot,
100%, yes.
yes, yes. So that is one of the top things that I recommend. Also, journaling and
Interesting. Yeah.
meditation.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, just to be able to, get in touch with what their truth is.
Right.
Sometimes when you've, you've been abused or mistreated for so long, and you've been in that family cycle, you don't know what your truth is versus what somebody else is telling you that your
Right.
truth is.
And how scary is that, Danielle? Right? Like
Yeah,
that's,
of course.
it's so
Yes.
scary because a lot of times I think in abusive situations, isolation is a huge part of that abuse because the
Isolation.
more
Hmm.
that control and that power dynamic, the more you don't have set points of reference for reality, healthy, conscious choices and behaviors, the more surrounded you are by
Hmm.
unhealthy dynamics, the
Right.
more they become true for you or acceptable or
Exactly.
whatever. And as soon as you start to fall down that rabbit hole,
Hmm.
it's not a pleasant one. It's not a pleasant one.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
so I think that the reverse isolation, I think my what I've said to people, I am not a therapist, right? But what I've said to people is if you can't like and my friend does this, but like if you can't get them to hear you, stop trying. Like just walk
Yeah.
away. Like
Yes.
leave, take yourself out of
Hmm.
it because it's I can't tell you how in many different scenarios and situations I tried over and over and over again to be heard, to communicate, to use my voice. And
Yeah.
it has fallen at life across in different
Yeah.
relationships and different dynamics on deaf ears. And
Yeah.
then it became very recently with my own father, I just said I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore because
Yeah.
you know, it's affecting my peace in my physical body. I can feel it affecting me
Yes.
and my
Yes.
voice is fine. I will communicate with much strength. That's not my problem, but it falls on deaf ears and the cycle continues. And
Yes.
watching that spiral of whatever you want to call it, psychosis, I don't know what the word is, but the spiral of like you can see the repeating behavior pattern
Yes.
over and over and
Hmm.
over again can't make him go to therapy, can't change, can't force any other human being to do anything.
Yes.
So,
Right.
I
Yes.
luckily enough have
Hmm.
an aunt who happens to also be a therapist. I think she's published, and
Mm.
she was like, "You just what happens if you just don't?" And I'm like,
Yes.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we're there now."
And that's so hard.
And it's so hard, but it's
Yes.
so like I realize for me because I'm not a therapist, so I can't speak for anybody else, but I would start to get a physical tension
Yeah.
in my heart space at a certain
Mm.
point in the aggravation, in the back and forth, in the engagement, in the
Hmm.
fighting or whatever. And I said, if I feel that, I'm done. The conversation is
Yeah.
over, the phone is hanging up, the I'm leaving, I'm walking away, whatever it is. And I said, that is my it took me years. I'm 43. It took me years to
Hmm.
get to that. One of the reasons I practice as your yoga instructor, I'm sure you do the same. I I always tell people because I'm not a therapist and I can't give the advice that you give. I always tell people develop the intuition with your body. Your body is
Yes.
constantly speaking to you. And we don't listen.
Hmm.
Yoga teachers
Yeah.
probably listen better
Hmm.
than most. People who meditate listen better than most. But nine times out of
Hmm.
10, people are running around like me
Oh,
today, frazzled, a to-do list one
we
million
all
miles
are.
long, and we are
Hmm.
so out of our bodies.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so listening to that signal, and it was huge. That one, like I could feel it now. That one feeling in my body, and I guarantee that 90% of people have that feeling when they're in these stressful
Yeah.
circumstances, no matter the
Hmm.
relationship dynamic, no matter with whom, romantic, familial, whatever the relationship, friends, no matter what
Hmm.
it is, I guarantee you there's a part of their body that is
Yeah.
internalizing and screaming at
Hmm.
them to pay attention.
Hmm. Oh, so right. So right. And we talk about that, being trauma informed as well.
Right.
The trauma responses within the body. The body holds a score, keeps the
Uh-huh.
score by Bessel van der Kolk, wrote that book, and it's so true. And we see that, in therapy. where it comes to people who've come in with a lot of abuse trauma history, and their bodies are struggling with that. They
Hmm.
have ailments, they have injury, they have tightness, they have, all kinds of things that you can, it makes sense when you hear their trauma history,
Right.
where that trauma gets stored. So I love what you said about, getting in touch with our bodies through breath work, through meditation, through self-care, and being able to identify, when we're experiencing a trauma, or something that's re-traumatizing for us.
Right.
Makes sense.
Right.
Hmm.
And like I said, that's my frame of reference, right? But it took,
Yeah.
I'm in my 40s. So like when I was in my 20s, I didn't have a relationship with
Yeah.
my body. I wasn't in tune with anything. I was in tune with I was in tune with a bottle in my hand, and I was so like, it's I don't
Sure.
anticipate, and you work with teens. So obviously, as it's so important, like I wish I had that where do you feel this in your body question 20 years
Yeah.
ago. But going back
Hmm.
to the conversation of as we generationally improve, we improve. So 20 years ago, I'm sure there were tons of people that did have that yoga instructors and people who practice these that wasn't
Right.
necessarily in my wheelhouse at that point in time.
Hmm.
And
Nope.
so if my therapist at the time didn't have that in their bag of tricks,
Exactly.
right? It wasn't
Yes.
accessible. But imagine the students that I'm sorry, your clients from your
Hmm.
professional versus the students from a yoga perspective. But imagine
Sometimes
if
they're
you're
students too.
there's a little overlap, right?
Yeah.
But imagine like how much farther along if at 14, 15, we ask them, hey,
Yeah.
I can see you're upset. Where do you feel that right now? And
Hmm.
like let that be a trigger for any other situation in your life, not in a negative way, but a positive trigger to know
Yes.
that that's your body setting a boundary before your brain even does.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
That's a safety
Yes.
cue. I don't feel safe, or
Uh-huh.
I am experiencing something that is not only taking me out of my power, but like talk about a waste of your energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Hmm. No,
You know?
definitely. Yeah, it's becoming so much more um, in the consciousness, I believe, of our society. I definitely know in the therapy world it's out there, it's
Yeah.
all over for therapists to begin thinking along those lines. And that's why I think like therapy and yoga, they go hand in hand. They're all connected. And I'm right now, actually, I'm trying to get a group up and running for teens for yoga, specifically
I love that.
for, kids who've experienced some trauma, and do some work around that. Because oftentimes with these teens and even, older adults, we don't know how to cope around the trauma.
Right.
We don't know how to move that energy so that the trauma doesn't remain blocked, and stored in our body, continuing to hold us back, continuing to make us feel stuck.
And affect our
So
choices. And
and
affect our
affect our
choices,
choices.
right?
Yeah,
It can
and
affect your
limit
whole life
us.
trajectory, right? Because you
Uh-huh.
feel stuck.
Feel
And
stuck. That's a big one.
right,
Hmm.
as we talk about the yoga aspect of it, I love that you're doing that, by the way. I think that's amazing. And B, I don't know if you've seen it in your classes or in your own practice, but I've seen a lot of times for specific types of trauma, like you'll have 9 times out of 10 it's a woman, and pigeon pose is a huge release, and people will say, why am I crying? Right. For me, it was a seated twist. It was after my mother passed away many, many years ago. And it was that's what brought me to yoga. And I was practicing yoga with a DVD. I think it was Gaiam and David something
Oh,
Lee or whatever. I'm sure
mm,
that's not his name, but Yee. I think it was David Lee Yee.
okay.
And I did a seated twist, and I just lost
Wow.
it. And it was
Mm,
all in the left side of my rib cage. And it was at that point that I started to realize like it really, your whatever you don't process mentally, your
yeah.
body holds on to physically.
Stores. Mm-hmm.
So you're not only
Absolutely.
affecting your choices, your brain's capacity to focus and make good positive choices, but you're affecting
Yes.
your body's physical health. I mean, trauma can
Hmm.
create disease in the body. I believe
Yes.
that. I believe
Yes.
that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Hmm.
and I
I believe
just
that
feel like
too.
it's such an important conversation
Yeah.
because it's not just about it. They are intrinsically
Yeah.
linked,
Linked.
my,
Yep. Yes, they
body,
are.
mind, and
Hmm.
soul.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
to I think I love that the therapeutic world is now
Yeah.
combining all of that because I think that
Hmm.
it is absolutely
Yes, it
critical
is.
to
It's
overall
very
healing and wellness, right? It's not
absolutely.
isolated. It's
Yes.
not
It's all
isolated.
about wellness. It's a full body wellness, I
Yes.
believe. Like for so long, I think, in the therapy world, it was dealing with, the mind. The mind
Hmm.
was separate from the
Yes.
body, but
Yes.
realizing how interconnected everything is, it's just, I mean, it just makes sense. It makes
Yes.
sense why people get stuck, and they're really they develop ailments around or because of certain traumas that are still in their body, get
Right.
stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And they feed off each other. So I know that we
yeah.
don't have all the time in the world today. So I would do want to ask one thing. So as I've gone through the series, and I think this is I really wanted to ask this one question. We kind of touched on it because you mentioned, we were talking about our voice, we're talking about the throat chakra, and I think it was the instead of talking about asana in the first, I usually do yoga poses as they relate to whatever the topic might be, but I actually talked about breath work and specifically a few different breaths, mainly the humming breath and lion's breath, as two ways to do exactly what we were just talking about, which is in an instance where maybe you are not safe to speak your truth in a moment and that energy is there in your body and it
Yeah.
falls on deaf ears, right? Or like you
Hmm.
said, like it doesn't land or you can't say it. Let's say you're in a meeting in a boardroom or at work and you cannot say the thing and you want to say the
Yes.
thing, but you're going to
Yes.
get fired if you say the thing, right? I feel like
Oh,
that's pretty accessible for everyone listening to this
yes.
podcast
Everyone could get
that lives
that.
in a daily life, right? And what do you do
Yes.
with that energy? Because you can, as I said, I feel it you feel it here. It's almost like you're
Hmm.
swallowing your words.
Yeah.
So I use those two breaths as
I
a
love it.
way to dissipate the energy
Hmm.
that gets trapped. And the lion's breath, in my humble opinion, is the one you would
I
use
love
for
that.
that get it out after the fact.
Yes.
While the
Yes.
humming breath would be one a little more for I need to release, I need to calm this energy. I need to soothe this energy. The lion's breath is I need to
Hmm.
purge this energy. So
Hmm.
is there anything that you would in that kind of vein say to people, give to people from your yoga background or from your therapy
Hmm.
background as a way to, if you can't express it, what do you do?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, I love those. I definitely love those. Um, so I had a client years ago, that always would say to me, I just need to scream. She felt that it was inside. She was just going through so much and so much oppression within her family, culturally, just uh, all kinds of stuff. And she would say to me, I just need to scream. And she, this was really good. She formed a little group. She called it the Screaming Group.
I
Because I
love
was
it.
like, what's wrong with the scream? I love it. I
Do it.
love that. And she organized a group of a few other girls. They would go out into this place in the woods that they knew,
Yes.
just they would just scream and let all of their emotions out. I thought it was beautiful and it was so therapeutic for her.
I
So I
love it.
often think about that when I see clients that are they're stuck. They have you could just like sense it from them.
Right.
Like they just need to like get that out. So while, I recommend screaming. Not everyone feels comfortable or has the
Right.
space to do that. But
Right.
I love those breaths. I love that. And also I would say that a little less purge like, but I do recommend sitting with, the meditation and just sitting with the emotions that come up and that can be uncomfortable,
Right.
so whereas the tendency is to avoid,
Yes.
I see a lot with these clients, like avoid, or press it down. I encourage, like, let let the emotions come up, feel and identify what is coming up for you emotionally in your body, and let it be. Let it arise and let it be and let it express itself. Because the more we squelch it
Mhm.
down, the more it's going to stay.
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's hard to do. And it's fearful, but with my clients, I try and really create that safe place. It
Yeah.
comes with a lot of support and safety within the therapeutic relationship.
Of course.
So, gaining that trust with me as their guide with this, that matters, because of course with trauma comes, you know, you don't trust. You don't
Right.
trust. There's
And
that lack of trust.
and it's in yourself
So
a lot of times too. It start like the lack of
yeah.
self, or the lack of self. There's a Freudian slip for you. But the I think a lot of the trust is it fundamentally. I had a friend. I've said this before on this podcast, and I know we're going to wrap up in a moment here, but it was, the ending of a relationship, the betrayal, the however it ended poorly, right? It's not the
Yeah.
relationship. It is, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's the I believed this. I,
Yes.
in my heart of hearts, I believed this was my person. I believed my intuition. I believed, I
Hmm.
believed. And so it's the you
Yes.
stop trusting yourself.
Yes, you do.
And
Yeah.
at the core of that, if you don't trust yourself, you can't trust anybody else because you can't meet
Yeah.
anybody else where you haven't met yourself. So
Yes. Hmm.
having someone to form a trusting relationship with you, I mean, I applaud you for what you do in that vein of the level of vulnerability you have to hold as a practitioner while remaining professional to
Yeah.
give these people that space to
Hmm.
I like in my mind's eye I see like an abused puppy, you know what I mean, like they're
Oh,
scared, they're they're
yeah.
not safe, and what do, they lash out, right?
Yes.
And being
Hmm.
that safe space is a wonderful thing that you do. And so I just want to
Yeah.
thank you for doing that, and for
Thank
being
you,
a yoga
Gia.
instructor, and for having the capacity to do both and to integrate the two. I think the people that are lucky enough to work with you will have leaps and bounds, especially the younger they are. Not that I want anyone young to have trauma, but we all experience it, such as life. So I
Absolutely.
know
Yeah.
that you are setting them
Yeah.
up for success. I know that you are.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you so much, Gia. I appreciate that. I hope
Thank
so.
you. I know so. I know you
We
are.
can do our best. Yes, but oftentimes it takes a while. It takes consistency. It takes trust, and it takes that relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, and it takes faith in the process, because we always say therapy is a process. It's
Yes.
not just we're going to do this and it's a cure. It's
Right.
it's never that, it's about a process. It's about learning, a lot of self-discovery as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well, I
they
want
go
to
hand
thank
in hand.
you so much for being here, for sharing your
Oh,
experience with our listeners and with me. And I will just say that I also appreciate each and every one of you listeners for sharing this space with us today, and ask that you please feel free to share the same with your loved ones. For more goodness, follow me on all the socials at Above the Ground Podcast and visit my website, airsaboveyoga.com. As always, don't forget to check out my other episodes and all of my amazing sisters at the Divas That Care network. You can find us on Spotify, Odyssey, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, or anywhere else that you might feel guided. Again, my name is Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground Podcast, where every day is a good one.
Namaste.